after a few opening comments from myself, we're going to have our guest speaker, Gareth Spencer, who is the PCS Culture Group President-elect and PCS organiser at South Bank Centre. We're going to have a series of workshops, and I'm not going to go into the details of those now, but you will have the option of choosing which workshop you want to go to. Then we're going to have some feedback. We've built in a break for ourselves to have a comfort break, and for Richard, our signer, to have a break, because we need to have hourly breaks. We'll then be announcing the new National Executive Committee coming through for the next 2 years. And then we're going to have an open discussion on priorities for AUE. So you could be free there to ask any questions you want, or to contribute any ideas or thoughts you have on what we should be focusing on the year ahead. So that's the agenda. And what we'll also be doing now is we'll take it off the share screen, but we're going to post it into the chat, so you'll be able to access it and refer to it during the course of the meeting. So it's already there, just like that. So I just want to go through some standards of conduct and behaviour that we will all need to adhere to during this meeting. So of course, we want to ensure that it's a safe environment for everybody, where everybody can participate equally and everybody feels comfortable. So I've mentioned, you know, about people introducing themselves in the chat and including their pronouns. And so, you know, if people can try and be aware of those pronouns if you're addressing any of your colleagues. We ask that you avoid making any personal remarks or demonstrating any behaviour that may cause offence or distress others, and avoiding abusive or discriminatory language or behaviour. Avoid harassing others on the grounds of age, sex, gender, race, colour, disability, sexual orientation, religion or belief, or any other personal characteristic. And anybody failing to adhere to and respect those principles will be removed from the event in order to ensure that it's a safe environment for everybody. But I'm sure that you would all want to adhere to those principles in any case, but it's important that we set that out at the beginning of the event. So I just want to briefly go through some of the things that we've been doing over the last year. And obviously for all of us who are artists, for all members of AUE, it's been an incredibly difficult year for us. Artists and the arts and culture sector have been hit disproportionately by the pandemic. We found ourselves in a situation whereby for many of us, our work was cancelled with immediate effect, and for the foreseeable future. It's impacted on us in terms of poverty, it's impacted on us disproportionately in terms of discrimination. And many of us also fell between the gaps when it came to government measures for artists and those in the culture sector. And that has largely been because of the requirements for self-employed people to be able to demonstrate how long they've been self-employed and to demonstrate their accounts going back some time. And because the fact that most of us are socially engaged artists and working in the community, we also have second jobs, or we have a main job and we do our art practice in addition to that. And so we fell through the gaps when it came to government measures. So of course, one of the major things that we've been doing over the last year is to try and lobby the government and put pressure on them to do more, to do better for our members and our sector. We've been working with other unions in the UK and wider on these issues, and other organisations that are campaigning on similar issues with similar concerns, which includes the culture sector and entertainment unions and the sections within unions like PCS. You'll be hearing from Gareth shortly, who also have culture sector workers who have been hugely impacted. And so we've been writing to the government, we've done open letters, we've done a petition, We've been speaking publicly on these issues and co-organising events. Of course, we've been supporting members with the particular concerns and how it's impacted on them individually, representing them in personal cases and providing advice and support. We've established and launched a good practice charter, which you'll hear more about later on, and also an artist solidarity fund to help our members financially with the difficulties they're facing. And just to mention that all of us on the National Executive Committee are volunteers, so we are not paid officials of the union. We don't have employees, we don't have a building or a premises. Obviously, during the pandemic, we wouldn't be in that anyway because of all the lockdowns. And so we've also been, as representatives of Artists Union England, trying to lead the union and work with members and representatives across the union, had to also do what we can to keep our own art practices afloat and to continue to do our jobs, because many of us also have paid employment with an employer in addition to our art practices. So it's been an incredibly stressful year, but thanks actually to all of you and all of my colleagues in Artists Union England for pulling together, and I think the strength of unity that we've demonstrated to get us through the last year. And of course we've got a challenge ahead of us, so this isn't the end of that process. It's still impacting on us, and our sector is going to be impacted on for some time to come. And so actually what we want to do during the course of today is to look at some of the things we could be doing, and how can we respond to these barriers and issues that we're facing, and how can we work together as a union to challenge what's happening and to support each other and to support our membership and our sector. So that's sort of a brief overview of what we've been doing, but you will hear more from colleagues during the course of the event. And we're going to split the chairing of this event. Martin Sundram, who is also the other co-chair waving there of Artists Union England, will also be chairing some sessions. So Martin will take over sort of halfway through and start chairing as well. And then I'll come back into the chair later on. So it gives me great pleasure now to introduce our guest speaker, who is Gareth Spencer, who is a colleague I've worked with for a long time, because in addition to my role with Artists Union England, I'm also the National Vice President of the Public and Commercial Services Union. And Gareth, as mentioned in introducing the agenda, is the President-elect of the culture sector of PCS. PCS organises workers in museums and galleries and historic royal palaces. And he's also the PCS organiser at the South Bank Centre, has played an instrumental role in campaigning on the issues that have been impacting at South Bank Centre and across the culture sector on PCS members. And is a fantastic union representative who's also had to face his own challenges because of how the pandemic has hit the PCS culture sector. So over to you, Gareth, and thank you so much for being here with us, because I know you've got a really busy schedule today as well.
Well, thank you very much, Zita. That was a lovely introduction. And thank you to the Artists Union England in general for the invitation today. My name is Gareth Spencer. My pronouns are he and him. I'm happy to take questions on PCS once I've given you a short spiel. Public and Commercial Services Union, as many of you may already know, is one of the large civil service unions, but it does have quite a big presence in the culture sector, mainly due to the way that a lot of the national institutions in this country are funded. So in the culture group, we have roughly 4,000 members across 30 branches, representing some major institutions, such as my own workplace, the South Bank Centre, the Tate Galleries, the British Library, the British Museum. We are a national group, obviously, we're not just limited to London. So the National Museum of Liverpool, the National Museums of Wales and Scotland, the National Libraries of Wales and Scotland are also part of the culture group. And then obviously DCMS or DDCMS, they keep adding letters to that department, is also covered by the group. So I guess today I was going to kind of talk about what the only thing we have been talking about really, which is the impact of COVID. So COVID really hit the culture sector hard, probably due to the kind of the past decade of neoliberal politics and government and the austerity, particularly the austerity government since 2010. So what that's meant for many of our institutions is a reduction either in direct grant and aid or Arts Council funding, which is the major quango for arts funding in this country. So institutions such as the South Bank or the V&A are expected now to generate more commercial income than they receive in government funding. So what we've seen is more shops, more pop-ups, more kind of use as an event space of these institutions, private hires, companies coming in and booking a space for their employees rather than that space being open to the public. What we've also seen is institutions creating commercial arms. So in order to maximize the profit that they can from these commercial activities, they've created kind of companies within a company. Two prime examples would be Tate Commerce and V&A Enterprises. These workers often are paid at lower rates. They're employed on different terms. Quite a lot of the institutions the PCS covers have civil service standards for their direct employees. So the way of avoiding paying those pension commitments or those kind of standards, they will create these commercial arms and employ people to do similar work, but with worse terms and conditions. And since 2010, we've really seen a kind of almost a disjointed program of cuts, privatizations and outsourcing. I'm sure many of you remember the 2015 strike at the National Gallery, when the National Gallery decided to outsource its front of house and security operations kind of wholesale to Securitas. Our colleagues there went on strike for 111 days against this because they knew it would lead to a worsening of their conditions, their pay, and the possibility that they might have to go and work elsewhere for Securitas at different sites. So what happened then with COVID was COVID sort of blew this model out of the water because the nature of these public institutions is that they need to be open to the public and the public need to come and spend money. So no public, no spending. Quite a lot of these institutions very quickly found themselves in a position where they weren't making income. And the teams that bring in the income are the teams that PCS represents. So security guards, front of house staff, visitor experience, primarily where a lot of our members are in these institutions. So we found ourselves very quickly in a position where we were dealing with a raft of redundancies across many organisations, including my own. And not only that, we found that organisations who maybe weren't in such trouble to begin with have decided this is a perfect opportunity to restructure and push through plans that they had for a while. So PCS has been kind of with Prospect, with other unions, Prospect, Bectu, and Unite, Artists Union, other groups, been really pushing DCMS and the government to provide more funding. Initially, we thought we were successful, but what we've really seen is that the Culture Recovery Fund isn't really worth the paper it's written on. It seems designed to protect buildings rather than workers. So it was all about kind of mothballing and bailing out institutions, but with no protections or guarantees for workers. So we've seen kind of mass redundancies across the sector. What this is kind of happily, I guess, we have also seen some resistance to this, particularly in the Tate Commerce branch, which went on strike last year for 42 days, as they wanted to be kept on the same terms as the Tate workers themselves. So that division between a direct group of workers who were relatively safe, and the commercial workers was very apparent during their strike. Obviously, last year, the kind of Black Lives Matter protests were a major focus for our members. We noticed that our institutions are not exempt from this moment, from this movement. Obviously, we have members in institutions like the Tate, the British Museum, which are kind of deeply embedded in the structures of this country, and therefore the kind of the racist history of this country. And what that also meant on the practical terms with the intersection of COVID is that we found that cuts fell disproportionately amongst our Black and Asian members. Our Black and Asian members are concentrated in these teams that were vulnerable, the front of house teams, the security teams. So sort of a double impact for those members. So we've had to fight hard for those members. So far we've done that by kind of exposing bad practice. There was a article in The Guardian last week or the week before exposing the use of non-disclosure agreements in cultural organisations to kind of cover up this history and legacy of racist bullying. Our colleagues, particularly in historic royal palaces, we found that Black reps have been singled out for redundancy on the basis of their activism in the workplace. So I guess I'll finish off with kind of what we want, what we fight for as a culture group. So our focus over the last few years that's been really brought into, made much more kind of pressing by COVID, is that we need a fully funded cultural sector that's directly funded by the government and not reliant on commercial income. And we need secure in-house jobs. We don't want people working for private contractors, such as the one that's just been announced at the Imperial War Museum, that has never run a security contract before, currently has 12 employees, but has been given a £12 million contract to manage 120 security staff at the Imperial War Museum. So more evidence of Tory crony corruption if ever you needed it. And obviously we want our cultural institutions to be inclusive and diverse, and we want them to be kind of free of the meddling that we're seeing with Oliver Dowden and his culture war that he's starting to fan up with his limits on what museums can and can't say or how they present history. So yeah, I think that's a rough run through of the past 12 months of PCS culture. So I'm happy to take any questions if people have got them.
Thank you so much, Gareth, for talking through the challenges that members in PCS and the culture sector have faced, and thank you also for the work that you've been doing and the work that colleagues in PCS have been doing, because I know that I've very much been following and part of those campaigns along the way. And I know that also disproportionately it's been migrant women and Black workers who've been hit by the targeting of job cuts. And I think what we've also seen is that across the sector, this sort of tokenistic approach, I'm glad that you mentioned about Black Lives Matter, because we've seen a really tokenistic approach by employers to jump on that bandwagon, including in the institutions in our sector, without actually taking into account the real impacts on race equality of their own actions in cutting jobs and cutting services and so on. So yeah, we've got some time for Q&A. Does anybody have any questions for Gareth? If you can raise your hand in the participants list, if you're able to do that. But if not, try and wave your hand and I'll look for you on the pages. So I'm just going to look through the participant list. Can't see any raised hands there. No questions for Gareth? Ah, Jill and Catriona. Okay, get Jill first, then Catriona.
Hi, thank you for that, Gareth. I I don't know, I feel slightly frustrated because I think having been part of supporting Tate Commerce workers especially in their strike, it feels like a lot of these strikes and the activism is the start of something, and they ran a really fantastic campaign, but I really want more ideas about how we take that forward and how we can support PCS workers through Artists Union in the future.
Thanks, Jill. I'll take Catriina's question and then come back to you, Gareth.
Can everyone hear me? Sometimes these headphones aren't great.
You're a bit low, but we can hear you.
Okay. So actually, I was just trying to draw attention to Jill, but I have a similar thought or question, which was what areas do you think Artists Union England and PCS can jointly campaign on in the future?
Okay. Do you want to come back on those questions, guys?
Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you. And yes, yeah, absolutely. It was really lovely to see the Artists Union banner outside the Tate and outside the South Bank Centre. So yeah, thank you to those of you who were able to either give physical support or even the online support and retweeting. So I think, yeah, it's hard to know. We face a challenge in the culture sector because of the kind of uneven nature of how the organisations are funded. There's quite a lot of like atomization. So bringing a campaign across, translating a strike at one institution into like a campaign across multiple institutions is very difficult. The nature of trade union law in this country makes it kind of next to impossible almost. But yeah, I think the solidarity is the best weapon that we have. So I think support for campaigns, support for picket lines is particularly good. In terms of joint campaigning, I think Zita mentioned it in her opening, and I know this anecdotally. I work at the Hayward Gallery, and a vast majority of my colleagues are artists. They've been to art school, they have professional practices. So I think, yeah, what we see in culture is that people take jobs as in front of house, they work in institutions, and they kind of balance their artistic work with a job in an institution. And yeah, it's making sure those kind of things are aligned and one supports the other, and that we have a sense of solidarity, and there's no one isn't seen as detrimental or inferior to the other, and that we push for a funding of the sector that allows people to pursue their kind of creative interests outside of their jobs. Yeah, I think that's the key way of moving forward together.
Thanks, Gareth. And Angela, you had a question.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, I just wondered if the PCS, you have data over the last year, information maybe from your members through surveys or whatever. I know we try to collect data on issues of our members of Artists Union England, and maybe that will be a way of with other unions. And I know this is it's hard work as well, particularly for us because we have no funding for workers, but maybe if we can get data about what the issues are for members across and use those as a joint campaign in the next year or two, that might be something. I mean, you might already be doing this, so apologies if you are.
Before Gareth, so just a second, I'll just check if there's anybody else, because that will be the sort of final round of questions, if that's okay. Anybody else have a question for Gareth? You can raise your hands in the participant list, or raise your hand. Me? Wave your hand. No? Yep. But please go ahead, Gareth.
Yeah, no, I think you're quite right. I think it's given that we do share like a cultural, we have sectoral interests together of cultural workers. It's incumbent on bigger unions like PCS that do have the resources to share those resources with smaller unions such as ourselves. So yeah, I think kind of surveying our members and seeing what they want from a cultural sector is really important. We have in the past had, we have generated like culture manifestos. So I think our conference is coming up in May, and that's like a big part of our conference will be looking at how our institutions reopen and what culture looks like in this country. So yeah, definitely scope for collaboration and sharing of data there.
Thank you very much, Gareth, for your speech and for answering those questions. You're very welcome to stay with us if you have the time. We're about to go into workshops, so if you did have the time, your input in those would be most welcome if there's any of interest and you're able to, but I understand fully if you need to get away as well. I'm going to, and please can you send our solidarity from AUE to all PCS culture sector members? Thank you. I'm going to hand over the chair now to my co-chair Martin for the next section of this event. Over to you, Martin. Thanks.
Thank you, Zita, and also thanks to everybody for giving up what looks, in London at least, a vaguely sunny morning to be with us today. The purpose of any annual general meeting is for members to set priorities and policies for the union going forward until the next one. In the past, we've done this via motions and various ways of actually getting tangible actions that the union can do. And we think that workshops are probably the best way forward for us to actually come up with a list of to-dos for the next year. So I'm delighted that we can welcome 4 workshop leaders today. Zita, who will be doing one on culture sector manifesto for recovery, which builds on quite a lot of work that other unions have been doing to try and actually nail down what it is the culture sector needs. Lorraine Monk's going to be leading a session on studios and how we can actually ensure fair deals for artists, not only now in the pandemic, but post-pandemic going forward. Joel is going to be leading a workshop on the Good Practice Charter, which Zita mentioned at the beginning, one of the achievements of the union, and a group of people that spent a lot of time bringing it into being, and where we go next with that, and basically what it is, what the purpose was, and how we can actually use it in practice. And Anthony Paget's going to be talking about how we can develop activism at a local level, but both recruitment, but also engaging in local actions for local artists collectively. Now, I'm hoping, this is our first Zoom AGM, obviously. We're hoping that the technology is okay enough for you to be able to select which workshop you'd like to go to. So Anastasia, are we good to go with the choice of breakout rooms? Now, if everybody chooses the same one, we may have to do a bit of editing to sort of balance the numbers. But in the first instance, I'm hoping that you'll be able to actually do the breakout rooms on the screen. Now, I have a pop-up that's
so I've opened the breakout room, so you should be able to self-select. However, if anyone has issues, we can, if we go through each of the workshops and people raise their hand, I can assign everyone quickly to their preferred workshop.
Uh-oh, accidentally pressed the wrong
in a room.
button.
It's a bit like Star Trek, isn't it? Being transported suddenly.
It was like, oh.
Do you know, for not very much money, you can hire a goat to make an appearance in a Zoom meeting. And it saved some farm in the West Country that was running out of any income streams. They hire out goats to make appearances in Zoom meetings. I think it's,
wow.
why not?
You could have had a go as a speaker
Yes.
for a moment. I'm just going to ask Martin, before we go back to the agenda, are we going to have the accounts presented today?
Oh, Nastasia, you were going to do a treasurer's report, weren't you?
Yeah.
After the break, because I'm going to ask Vanessa to say some words about the Solidarity Fund, how it's set up, not in whatever depth, and maybe then. So we'll do the. Let's wait for a couple more people and just I'll say what I think we should do in the break, after the break. Are we all back?
Studios are back.
Okay. So I love the captioning. It's much better than what people are actually saying. So it's poetic. Okay, I think we are all back now. Yeah. Okay. Now I'm going to ask each group to just report back briefly. As I said before, the object is to have some policy we can take forward. So what I'm going to try and do, if each a speaker from each group could say roughly what they've come up with, and I'll try and translate it into a proposition that we can vote on. After the groups have reported back, if anyone's kept any notes, ideally electronically, do let us have them and we can add them to the record of this meeting. But ideally, a kind of proposition that we can vote on after the break, we'll set up the voting system and either approve or disapprove or abstain from whatever it is the working groups breakout rooms have come up with. Then we'll also announce after the break the results of the elections. We didn't in fact hold elections because there were not enough candidates to have a contested one. And Vanessa will talk about the Solidarity Fund briefly, and Nastasia will give a brief Treasurer's report. Then we'll have an open discussion about either if people are still undecided about the policies, we can take them into further discussion or come up with anything else that was not included in the workshops, which are quite focused, that anybody in the meeting feels that the union should take forward. And I'll hand over to Zita for that discussion. So that's the rest of the afternoon. Now we're a little bit behind. We're not too far behind, we're about 10 minutes behind. So if I could ask in the same order as perhaps on the agenda, each of the groups to report back briefly, and I'll jot down what I think you've agreed, and you can agree with me whether that's what you said or not. How about that? Okay, so first, Zita, can you report back from the Culture Sector Manifesto group?
No, because I wasn't the person appointed to feedback from my group, but the person who
was
appointed, Catriona, will feedback.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Zita. Sorry, Martin. Yeah, so I'll try and keep it brief. We had quite a meaty, wide-ranging discussion, and Zita shared a couple of very useful documents that PCI, and I can't remember the name of the other group, forgive me, Zita, had drawn up, which are quite broad kind of goals in terms of cultural recovery. And in our discussion, we tried to pin things down to some more specific aims, specifically that us as AUE could focus on within the context of those. And one of the things that we talked about was the Cultural Recovery Fund and the fact that just over half of the £800+ million has been spent, only half of it has been distributed, and joining with other trade unions like MU to campaign for a fairer distribution of the remaining money, and that some of it would go directly to workers and freelancers and self-employed people, not just to institutions and to supporting buildings. So that was the first thing. The second thing was about having a different culture of working. So we had points around co-working, collective working, mentoring each other, trying to kind of move away from a very competitive funding environment, try and rethink ways of making those processes applying for grants fairer, and moving to a longer term funding culture, so it's not just project to project based, which is desperate, I think we'd all agree. So that was the second area. And the third area, which kind of related to that, was looking at trying to campaign more actively around a universal basic income, and thinking about how many artists and other precarious workers could benefit from that.
Great, that's fantastic. So can I say that the union should campaign on the Cultural Recovery Fund, of which only half has been distributed, and that it should go to work campaigning alongside other cultural unions to ensure it goes to workers, not just institutions, for the first one. Shall I read that again? Yeah.
I think Zita might be trying to chip in. Oh, no.
No, I'm waving to Vanessa's little one. Who's on
Yeah. What is, I'll type these into chat. Yeah.
Well, Elizabeth's kindly posted notes in the chat as well.
Yeah.
That was the third
I'll type this into chat in the break, and you can have a look at them, see whether you agree with what I jotted down. So I've got cultural recovery campaigning, and to encourage different cultures of work, and campaigning around universal basic income. So those are three policies we can take forward. Yeah. Okay, I'll type them up as wording that we can vote on and put it in the chat. Okay, so the next group is Lorraine's studio campaign. Do you have a speaker?
Yeah, sorry, we didn't actually appoint anyone. So if anyone in the group wants to add anything, can you put it in the chat? That'd be great. And I thought what reflected well with the people in it is all those different models that we have for studios, whether it's individual studios, multi-studios, or indeed someone who is in Northwest in Burnley that can't get a studio. There isn't, the nearest one is Manchester and couldn't afford it anyway. So there are all those kind of different models of what we need. And then obviously looking at it in terms of post-COVID, where there's now more internet, some people are exhibiting on the internet, different forms of practice. So what do people need? We really need to know that. And some people just need exhibition space, other people need working space. And what everybody obviously we need now is more support for artists and not rip off studio rents, which is I don't think we voted on that, but I got the feeling everyone absolutely thought that. So the different models, we felt we should be doing more work. We know that around getting the data. We need, when we're lobbying government, when we're trying to get stories into the press, we need more information. And we need to be able to show what kind of models that we want, and they're going to be different ones. And particularly now, because of COVID, there's this opportunity with especially the urban centres being empty. There'll be people being attracted to the idea of art because it might bring the footfall back into the towns again. And actually what we need in terms of helping maybe artists negotiating with local landlords or councils to set up things for themselves, or Will was talking about high-fuzz studios, and whether there's also that model of a decent studio manager that are managements which aren't ripping off rents from the participants. So that there's a lot of stuff going on there. Need for data, need to get information out. And a recommendation that it's one of the priorities for Artists Union that we try to do as much as possible in this regard. So I don't know if anyone wants to add anything quickly to that. Oh yes, sorry, and Will was also talking about, we've got to act fast. The government's doing so many things at the moment. Permitted development rights coming in this year. There's a whole load of things like that. We know what they're about. They're trying to shore it up for their cronies and everything else. And we really need to be on the ball about this and trying to do everything we can to respond and argue against it.
Sorry, Lorraine, just that last bit, specifically the government's
It's a permitted development right, so they're bringing in
permitted development. Okay.
We need to look at it.
Yeah.
Detail.
Right. Okay. I'll type something up and put it in the chat, and you can look at it in a second. Thank you, Lorraine. Right. So the third group, Joel. Did you come up with your group, Richard?
Yes. I'm going to hand to Richard, who is.
Yeah, I'm going to give a little bit of feedback. It was just me and Joel. There's not a lot to say, but it was really great to hear about the good practice as a working group. Like that's come out of a group of people that kind of have ownership over that. I suppose we talked a bit about next steps. I suppose I'll just say that I think this is a really impressive thing. So when I saw this released, I think it already looks like a really workable, useful document. So I was really pleased to see that whenever that was a few months ago. So well done, Joel, and anyone else here that was working on that. Yeah. I think it's great that it's being kind of handed over to designers to make it kind of as accessible and workable, usable as it can be. That's brilliant. I suppose a question for me is whether there's whether it's now the time for other union documents to go through that process as well, like the rates of pay document. Maybe that could be more kind of, yeah, maybe it could be more, what am I trying to say? Sorry, it's the first conversation that I've had today. So yeah, I also heard about the possibility of like small launches in different regions maybe. And I look forward to being part of a London one. I think that was kind of it. Is that fair, Joel? Was there anything else that came up?
Yeah, I think we're getting people signing up to it now via an application process. But just to clarify, still very much a working document. So the feedback we're getting from people is really important. That it isn't sort of set in stone, and that it's a working document. But yeah, that covers it.
Just one more thing, which again is just a kind of tribute to the work, really. Like, I think it's really great that you've included mental health and well-being as a separate thing. That often is sort of lumped together with health and safety, but I think the working group were really right to include that as the sixth strand.
I put a copy of it in the chat for those that haven't seen it, the one pager.
Okay, so broadly, it's building on the good work that's already been done, expanding it regionally, and it's a living document, and that it should be built on. Is that sort of the gist? Yeah. It's great. Okay, and so Anthony, local activities. Anybody from your?
Hi, Anthony, shall I take over? I took the notes.
Yeah.
Sorry, just before can you see me? My action is always good. In the meeting to try and get the action points from our meeting.
Yes.
And before Paul presents, it was just to say that Liz in the group had said about shareable memes as a way forward for issues of the union for recruitment, and also that Jill had said about activism and taking part in demonstrations as a way of recruitment. So they were just a couple of action points. But about the meeting in general, the breakout, I'd like to hand you over to Paul, please. Thanks, Paul.
All right, cheers, Anthony. I think you've covered the kind of two main points really, because you kindly put up all your notes into the chat facility. So I'll just quickly run through them. I mean, basically, you started by saying it is about learning and sharing experiences and understanding and working on a personal basis, really, that finding out the relevant people in organisations, working with other individual artists. But then you talked about the AIDA, the AIDA, attention, interest, desire and action to get people involved. And sort of using the good practice charter as well as a tool for encouragement and recruitment and local activism. Your example of working with the Liverpool Independent Biennale, that organisation, and how they're going to promote that as well. So it's kind of like using organisations to promote the artist union policies and intentions and aims for everybody's benefit. There was a kind of point about the unique selling point of the Artists Union England, whereby a lot of artists kind of confuse us with Artist Newsletter, the AN information company, and it's basically, you know, why artists should join the Artist Union. In terms of that we're more democratic, we have a kind of clearer idea on rates of pay. So again, it was that what you mentioned about sharing the uniqueness and the kind of benefits of being an Artists Union England member, and also our connections to other trade unions in England and the United Kingdom, and also working through our regional cliques, the Creative and Leisure Industry consortiums. I think it's consortium. Jill mentioned training with TUC members and other union groups, and basically if you become a AUE rep, then you can go on these training courses. And basically the benefit of being an AUE member, as Anthony just mentioned, that Liz brought up and that Martin kind of seconded, was making things more shareable, better promotion, I think, in the benefits of being an AUE member, and our role in working at a national level, working with government and other trade union organisations. Because I think one of the things that we talked about was this kind of vagueness that when we talk to other artists, they may share similar ideas of democracy and solidarity, but it's a bit kind of, well, isn't that part of what I'm say an artist newsletter member for? Well, that's more about having toolkits for being competitive, whereas Artists Union England is more about solidarity and moving everybody forward. So I can add those kind of later bits that we discussed in the chat facility, but as I say, Anthony kindly put a lot of those points into the chat, so they should be there for notes taken forward.
Okay, so broadly, it's building, raising the profile of AUE local levels, including joint activity with other groups and organisations, and developing a sort of toolkit for shared resources. Is that what you?
No, I think that I mentioned the phrase toolkit. I think that was used as a in respect to other organisations, how they enable these toolkits for artists to compete, whereas more about the solidarity and training for enabling that and bringing, moving the activism on.
So developing or stressing the identity of AUE as a trade union rather than a service organisation for artists, and using that to encourage people to join a democratic organisation.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, we're not really being trained to facilitate institutions and organisations to meet their aims. We're more about meeting the desires and the things that artists need.
Yeah. Okay. In that case, we're slightly behind schedule. What I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly type these up in the break. If we take 15 minutes, come back at 1:05, and then depending on how far I've got with typing this up and if I need to clarify anything, we'll do. We may vote on them later in the meeting after in the discussion period. But if I can, I'll have them ready to vote on when we come back as starting point for some actions. Okay, so if we take a break now, it's 12:51, so 5 past. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
£25 in order to sort of keep it going. Our hope is that we can really give out bigger, larger grants, because obviously £100 doesn't really go very far, but it's helping a little bit at the moment. So at the moment we've just got about just over 2,500 in our bank account, and yeah, we're hoping to basically raise more money for other means and then be able to give larger grants out in the future. We also did a mental health awareness course in January, which was really successful online, and all the money raised from that went to the fund. So yeah, that's pretty much it, I think.
Thanks, Vanessa. Anybody got a quick question on the Solidarity Fund? It's going remarkably well, and we just hope it continues for, well, forever. Okay, I suddenly realised something, which I'm looking at the clock. We were, apologies, Richard, our signer, who actually was kept signing for longer than we'd agreed, and it's entirely my fault. We overran this morning, so I'm sorry about that. And we'll continue quickly. So, Nastasia, if you want to sum up the accounts where we are.
Yeah, I'll keep it very brief. So because this AGM has happened later than originally planned, the accounts that are being shared are the final accounts for 2019. I will share the screen, and I'm at the moment doing, can everyone see that? At the moment, I'm doing the annual return for 2020 because our accounts run from January to December. So in May, you will all receive an email with the summary of 2020's accounts. But the image you can see on the screen at the moment is the final accounting report for 2019. So the total income for that year was £20,252, and £13,266 of that came from membership. The remainder of that came from donations, but also a successful bid to Union Learn, and that the funds for that went towards building the membership and regional organisers' work and expenses for members to attend conferences and training. So at the end of the year, after the expenditure, there was £3,930. We don't have a political fund, and all of the exec, including chairs, are voluntary. So all of the funds that are raised go back into building the union and maintaining that. So it's expected that the income for the next report that you'll receive will be less because we haven't had the funds from Union Learn this year. But again, our expenditure has gone down because we haven't been covering travel to go to meetings. But in addition, you will also receive a breakdown of the Solidarity Fund, which of course is a new fund that's been running over this last year.
Any questions from anybody on finances? Okay, I just noticed that when I pasted in what I thought were the summaries of the action points into the chat, it seems to have truncated them. So I'll do them again presently. Now, as we're not ready to go to the vote on them immediately, I'm going to suggest that what we do is we start the open discussion on priorities, get the votes for these set up, and any other votes that occur that perhaps in the discussion, anything that we feel we should need to vote on, we can either do quickly with a show of hands then, or we can set it up electronically. So while we're setting up this electronically, I'm going to hand back to Zita, who will chair a discussion on either things that have come out of the groups, or more generally, what people might wish to discuss further. And I did notice that universal basic income did come up in one of the reports back, and that may be something that occurs. So, Zita, I'll hand back to you while I sort out voting on the other bits and bobs.
Okay, Nastasia, you've got your hands up.
Yeah, I was going to say that I've set up 4 polls. The only one that I haven't set up is the UBI, because I think that one was down to be discussed what that action would be. But the other 4 polls I've set up.
Sorry, Lisa, do you want to take those now, or do you want to see if some more votes arise in the course of the meeting? What's your preference?
Let's give it a few more minutes, but when you say the rest of the meeting, we've actually only got 11 minutes left of this meeting. Yeah. So we either need to, we're not going to have a big discussion. There's no time to do it unless we suspend standing orders and people want to continue. But I understand, people might be busy. Obviously, Richard, when you have to go, because you can't be expected to stay any longer than you have in the circumstances. But I need to put it to people. Do you want to suspend standing orders and continue for like an extra 10 minutes after 1:30, or do you want to end at 1:30?
10 minutes, say yes.
I didn't ask that very well, did I? I put them both together. Extend by 10 minutes. Any indications? Just wave or... Okay, so broadly people agree to that. Okay, so yeah, so I think give people a few more minutes if they want to vote, Martin, and we can come back to that. So yeah, I'll open it up now and see. This is really just an open session for you to say anything you want to in terms of priorities, any questions you've got, any clarifications you might need on anything any of us have talked about today. So it's just a space for you really. So do indicate if you want to come in. I've got 2 hands already, so I'll take Will and then Catriona. Thank you.
Sorry, my mistake. I left my hand up from voting for the extension of 10 minutes. So.
Oh, it's an old hand. Is yours a new hand or an old hand, Catriona?
Mine's a new hand. What I wanted to propose was that we do a survey of members again. I think the last one was some years ago, and I think it would be really useful in terms of campaigning and knowing what the members are facing at the moment. I was just thinking in terms of the discussion that we were having earlier in terms of equality, Zita, and just really knowing who our members are and how we can best represent them, and also how their circumstances might have changed as a result of COVID. I mean, personally speaking, this last year has been a complete nightmare because of not having any childcare and of having huge caring responsibilities. And I think knowing what people are facing helps us prioritise what we need to do collectively. So, yeah, I just wanted to propose that as a motion.
Okay, I think that's a very good idea, and certainly on equality grounds, there are disproportionate impacts of the pandemic on our members. So put that to the meeting. Do people agree we should go ahead with the survey? You can kind of just wave or nod, thumbs up. Yeah, I think everyone's agreeing to that. So that's an action point for us to take forward, to survey members, and within that survey to include questions around equality impacts on people. And just to say, we have an equality statement on our website. We're working towards building equality networks for different groups of people with different protected characteristics. So for Black members, women, disabled, LGBT+, etc. So we have people that are leading on different equality strands, and we've just had a series of TUC equality conferences, and we had representatives from AUE at those conferences, and including people also contributing to the debates and workshops. So, you know, we've been inputting into equality at that level as well. Anthony.
Yeah, thank you, Zita. Just to say that I forgot to mention, we've got a survey going with the Liverpool Biennial Independence at the moment, artists' working practices and conditions. A little bit goes into the impact of COVID, but that wasn't really the purpose of the survey. Because it's such a big area, it would be brilliant to have a survey looking at COVID and at discrimination as well, all the areas of that, including age, sex discrimination, disability, as well as race. And so please fill out the survey at Liverpool Biennial if you get time, and share that. That's all really, Zita. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Anthony. And Jill's just put into the chat something about which probably those acronyms won't make any sense to you. So there's a London, an Eastern and South East TUC structure. Well, there are actually TUC structures for every region and nation in the UK. And so we do have representatives on some of those. So just to flag that up, that is something that people can get involved in, representing AUE in your region or nation at TUC level, Trade Union Congress. So if it's something that interests you, then you know, do get in touch with us, and we can give you more information and link you up with who's leading already, if we have somebody in that area, and can give you you know, a bit of a briefing and understanding of how the structures work, and how you can get involved and represent us in those. There's quite a few people that are already doing that. Any other contributions? If you can indicate in the participants list, that's helpful. If not, wave at me. Can't see anybody indicating. So, Martin, where are we with voting?
I understood that we might discuss universal basic income. I think, Jill, you wanted to maybe raise it as something we should at least investigate, but there wasn't. I didn't put it into the voting as an agreed topic from a breakout group, because it was mentioned in passing. Is anything, as you're the past member of the exec with most direct involvement in the campaign, are you able to say a couple of things?
Yeah. The idea of universal basic income, in case people don't know about it already, is that everybody should have a basic income rather than having to apply for welfare. And if you need additional money above that because of disabilities or children or other reasons, that pensions, then they should be available over and above that. But the idea is that everybody, regardless of who they are, where they are, receives a basic income, which means that everybody has enough, hopefully, or has a decent amount of extra money. And for artists, that could make a huge difference. I know the TUC are debating ideas around universal basic services as well, and whether that's a better idea to provide services in terms of utilities and making sure everybody has a home, obviously, and things like that. It's slightly controversial. But for artists, it could mean a huge amount. So a universal basic income for artists would mean that people can work as artists and might not have to juggle so many other additional jobs. So I certainly think it's worth carrying forward in terms of investigating further what impact it could have for artists and how we could implement it for artists.
Thank you, Jill.
Peter, can I come in quickly?
Yeah, yes, of course. Go on,
yeah, just to say, we've already got motions on that, and we took it to the TUC Women's Conference last year, and for a variety of reasons, it was remitted for discussion, and it's finally going to come to the June committee of the Women's Committee to discuss, because as Jill said, it's controversial because of how much and who and all that. I know, yeah, it says universal, but it's about how it could be afforded and who. And so taking it to the TUC Women's Committee is a really good step forward. And yeah, I mean, we need to do more work on it because we know how important it could be for artists.
Thank you, Lorraine. I'm not sure what's happening with the poll, Sasha. I've got it up, and then everything says.
Sorry,
I don't know if it's something I'm doing. Or...
No, I forgot that if I pressed enter as in to go to a next line, it would launch the poll. So I've accidentally launched it twice, but I've now pulled it back, and I'll launch it when everyone's ready to vote.
Okay, should we do that now then? Oh, Richard, you've got your hands up. But yeah, we could do it at the same time, so we could still launch it.
It was just a question about the UBI thing. And I just wondered, do we have a sense of what AUE's support for that or research into that might look like? Like, what are we?
So at the moment, I'm part of the UBI Art Lab, which is a group of academics and artists researching UBI, in particular in relation to artists. I mean, I don't feel that we can go ahead with it as it is. So I don't feel we can give total solidarity to UBI as it stands, which is why I said I feel it needs to be investigated further. For example, Disabled People Against the Cuts are not for UBI because they are concerned about being seen as different, so and being targeted, and whether it in theory it should be universal like it says, so it should go to everyone, but in practice, in the hands of a right-wing government, it could be implemented quite differently. So the reason I said to go forward with investigating it is I think in terms of artists, it could be something quite different. So a universal, I think Anthony's put in there, should we have a UBI for artists, or should we have a materials and studios grant, weekly studios grant? That, for example, could be a way forward. So I think I feel it's about artists' unions supporting extra investigation, maybe a working group into how we can implement it for artists.
Thanks, Jill. Lorraine's put in the chat, our position is we want the TUC to look at the options. We just want to take the debate further. And we have previously put up motions to TUC Women's Conference, for example, and because lots of unions didn't have a position on a particular model, that motion didn't go through. Lorraine, you wanted to come in?
No, that was it really. I was just saying that's our position, and but we're just asking them to look at it, and they've asked us to go and talk to them about that. That's fine. We haven't made any further decisions on it apart from saying we think it should be looked at. That's our position.
Okay, so thank you, Lorraine. Richard said I'd be interested in being part of any working group on this if helpful. I think it actually would be helpful for us to have a working group. So do people agree to that? And obviously we could put it out more widely, so broadly thumbs up, nodding. But does anybody want to be on that? Put it in the chat Yeah, so we can make a note of the names and then we can get something going on that. That would be good, thank you. I'm still not sure or very clear, Nastasia, the situation with the poll. It hasn't popped up again on my screen. What do we need to click on it? You're on mute.
Sorry, I wasn't aware you wanted me to launch it. Yeah, I can do it now.
Oh, yeah, I said while we're speaking, you could, yeah, let's do it now. And we'll give people a couple of minutes. Thank you. There doesn't seem to be a way of clicking on anything though on my version. I don't know if that's the same for everybody.
You should see it appear and you should be able to vote. You should be able to click on for, against or abstain.
No, when it popped up before there were boxes, but it wouldn't let me click in the boxes. Now the boxes are gone. It just tells me percentages of people who have voted.
Dita, that might be because you're host, so you can have a casting vote.
Oh. So you can all, but you can all see it. That's so as long as everybody else can. It's just the co-hosts who can't then, yeah? Everyone else can access it, is that correct?
No, I can't see it.
At the bottom of your screen, you know where it says mute, stop video, participant security, all of that stuff. There's something that says polls at the bottom. Can you see that?
Oops.
Does everyone see it?
Mine doesn't seem to work either.
I know there's some percentages in there, so some people have voted. So it's 47% have voted.
Yeah, I can see it now.
57. Yeah. Oh, it's going up.
Now, all the exec are hosts, so we haven't voted.
I can make you not hosts.
Yes, please. Okay, how are we doing, Nastasia? Because now I'm not a co-host, I can't see the percentage.
So Martin should be able to vote now as well. So we're on 86%. So 20 of 23 people have voted. I won't be able to vote, but I'll just add that on.
Okay, so, yeah, it's just 3 questions. So anybody who hasn't and would like to do it now if you can.
Sophie should be able to vote now.
Is it working for you, Sophie?
Great.
Oh, Sophie says can't vote, but I agree with all votes.
Hi,
Oh,
that's me
now.
too.
Yeah.
Dita, that's me too. I'm really going to have to go soon, so I'm kind of like.
We did say we're going to finish at 22. Take care. Well, what I'm going to do is, do you want to announce the results now then, Nastasia? Because
yes,
we've run over and I just want to do some final thank yous before we close.
For the first one, the campaigning with Musicians Union and other unions to prioritise workers rather than institutions, 90% for, 5% against, 5% abstain. For the second one, campaigning for a different culture of working, e.g. co-working for a fairer and longer term working. Sorry, that doesn't make much sense the way I've written it. That is 100% for. For number 3, to seek data and feedback from members and their situation, 95% for, 5% against. And number 4, to encourage participation in local activism and raise the profile of AUE. That is 100% for as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, everybody, for participating in that. So we've either got unanimous or overwhelming support, and it would have popped up on your screen now, so you can see that. I would like to now just move to some closing comments and thank yous. So I want to start by thanking all of you, giving up half of your Saturday and being here and for your active participation in the AGM. I'd like to thank the outgoing National Executive Committee and congratulate the incoming National Executive Committee. I want to give special thanks to somebody who's not here, Teresa Easton, founding member, instrumental member, previous secretary of Artists Union England, and is also one of our regional organisers doing amazing and fantastic work on our behalf and representing us on all different fronts. So she couldn't be here today, but we want to thank Teresa for all of her work, you know, through the life of AUE as well as in the last year. We want to give special thanks to Richard, our BSL signer especially, who's put up with us going over time, not taking breaks on time, and for that we sincerely apologise and see that you're still with us, Richard. Thank you so much, and we will do better next time around so that you come back. You won't want to come back to us if we don't give you those hourly breaks, and we must make sure we do that. So it's not acceptable that we didn't do that for you. My sincere apologies. I would like to thank the trustees of our Solidarity Fund, some of whom you've spoken to and heard from today, to all our representatives and to all our members, and leave you with a message of solidarity, unity in our struggle for the rights of artists going forward, for equality and human rights, and for coming out of this pandemic in a better way we came into it, because actually things weren't perfect before, they weren't brilliant before. So when we hear people talking about going back to normal, actually we don't want to go back to whatever normal was, because it wasn't brilliant for us as artists, particularly socially engaged artists in the first place. What we want to do is to go forward and have a better, stronger arts and culture sector with proper democratic rights, where you know, we are respected as workers and given the dignity and rights that other workers have. And so, you know, we have got a battle on our hands, that anything and everything you can do to participate in AUE, we know everyone's got a lot on. Even, you know, if it's something small, it's still helpful. Voting in a poll is really helpful. But we hope that, you know, we could encourage you to get more actively involved if you've got the time to do so. And wish you a pleasant weekend and solidarity going forward. And thank you so much for being here today. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Zita. Thanks, everyone.
Zita, thanks, Martin.
Thanks,
Thanks, Zita. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you, particularly. Bye.
Bye.